Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversations with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in the music world. Today, I have the great pleasure of having one of my favorites, and he was, favorites in many ways because there's so much to learn from not only swinging, linear playing, but also surviving all our lives and just doing great music and just being a great human being. Mike Clark. Mike, thanks so much for joining me on this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aldo. Thanks for having me. It means I'm honored, man.
Tell me, before we talk about the trip, the shaping your journey, that whole transition from when we were young and to where we go, who opened doors, what made you do certain things, what made you decide to do certain things, who influenced you, and all of that business, which I think is really interesting and important for people to know other people's trajectories. Tell us a little bit about way back, what was that seed? What did it for you?
Well, okay, for me, it was a kind of a unavoidable karmic destiny in the aspect that my father was a drummer. And he wasn't a very good drummer, but he was a professional drummer who got discouraged because he felt he couldn't improve, so he quit. Young, he quit at about 19 or 20, but there was always he played jazz records incessantly around the house, boogie woogie and what do they call it? No, jump music. Wynonie Harris and who's the guy that did Caledonia, for crying out loud? Louis Jordan and Louis Prima and Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Benny Goodman and Krupa and all. And so this was going on before I could walk or talk all the time. He played the records constantly, and there was always a drum set there.
Wow.
So
Nice.
I remember doing this. I walked over to the drum set. I was about 4, and I kind of pounded out some sort of tom-tom Gene Krupa type of sort of thing. And my father went, wow, this guy can play. So that very night, he took me to a nightclub where his buddies were playing and had me sit in with the band. And I remember, I can remember doing this. I had to stand up to reach the pedals. I couldn't sit down. And we played Sweet Georgia Brown. Yeah, so that was and that was with a Dixieland or traditional band, jazz band. And that was it. So I started playing, and I played, immediately I got in the school bands, and I was fairly advanced by the time I was 7. I was listening to every Louis Bellson, Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, Sid Catlett, Lionel Hampton, this type of Barrett Deems, that type of stuff, Jack Sperling. And then when I was about 8 or 9, my father brought home an Art Blakey record. He didn't know who Art Blakey was, and he just saw a guy with a drum set on the cover. Excuse me. And when I heard that, I went nuts. I went completely nuts. And then everything changed. I found Charlie through that. My dad and I started buying records, and I was playing every day at home and playing in the school bands. And then I was quite young, I was in a school jazz band. So I started trying to, finding out about Charlie Parker and Max Roach and, all the rest. But also, while this was going on, my dad, he loved going to jazz clubs with or without me, and he would drag me to all the jazz clubs constantly, like 2 and 3 nights a week, and he went way more, but I was in school and but he would take me, and then he would ask the drummers or the band leader or buy somebody a drink, can you let my son play? So that's what happened, and I'm still going. So that's the story.
Wow. So it was but those jazz gigs, I mean, they didn't start until 9 o'clock late, right? I mean, They let you in. That's
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah, in those days, there was no problem getting a kid into a nightclub. Nobody even thought about it. And once the nightclub people found out that I could play at at a professional level, they were glad to see us coming, and in fact, started hiring me as as a a solo artist. And I played at the Blue Room in the New Orleans hotel for the Jimmy Dean show, and I would get an occasional call to do these things.
Nice.
And
Wow.
so that's what happened. And it was always, it was weird that I ended up, I won't go into this right now, but it's kind of weird. I ended up playing funk with Herbie Hancock because all of this was jazz. The whole thing was acoustic jazz. I had never even thought about the other music at all
And this
until
was like you were in California, right, at the time, growing up,
the
right?
railroad man. And he left my mother quite early and he traveled constantly. So he would take me to New Orleans, Savannah, Augusta, a lot of New Orleans, and Dallas. And then he moved to Dallas. So I went to Dallas and I met the great drummer Paul Guerrera, the great teacher from North Texas. And he started getting me a few little jobs here and there when I was 13 and 14 and stuff like this. And so, yeah, he traveled throughout the South, Atlanta, Savannah. And so I went to all these places with him. And in those days, in all of those towns, there was 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 working jazz clubs. So it was not hard to find if you, excuse me, if you went to a pretty if you went to a dinner club, they usually had a jazz trio or a quartet playing, you know,
Nice. Wow. Like music was all around all the time, right?
all the time. You never had to we never thought that it would be kind of like it is now, where you got to really seek out. If you want to hear jazz, you got to go to the Blue Note or something like this.
Too much. Did you after that like go study, or did you right away dive into professional performing and touring?
I, I pretty much my dad got me involved in professional performance. He knew professional musicians, and they'd say, "Man, this kid can play," and they would try to every once in a while get me to work or to play. And then I met other kids that were jazz musicians as well in the school bands, and we would form little groups and play at pizza parlors. Even at 13 and 12 and 13, we had little bands, and we would try to get gigs or dances. Oh, and in California, on the Italian side, my mother's side, there were 4 professional fighters, and one
Nice.
of them owned a bar. Uh, and he would hire me to hire a little trio or jazz quartet. When I say jazz, we'd play standards and stuff. It wasn't like Sonny Rollins or anything. We were kids. And he'd hire me for a weekend every once in a while, because he could pay me cheap, and we'd come and play 4
Yes.
complete sets and be happy to be there.
Wow. In a pizza
Ah,
place. Now there's a great idea, Mike. Let's open up a pizza parlor and have musicians play. I love it.
I do, especially in New York.
Oh man, yes. And so that's right. You're half Italian. Your mother was Italian from that descendants. Beautiful. And so here's the question that I always had, because I remember when I called you to join us on faculty at the COSA camps, my whole thing, and I didn't know you so much as a jazz drummer. When I ran into Mike Clark, to me, you were the drummer at Headhunters with Herbie Hancock, who worked the whole linear thing, which I thought was huge, which I thought the concept was beautiful, and there's no one else who could explain it, aside maybe Dave Garibaldi, in that world. But the way you approached it with Herbie Hancock, I thought was interesting. And I remember when I called you on that, and you said, no, I'm a jazz drummer. And I'm going, jazz drummer? So we had you remember that discussion, but you
Yeah.
finally, that was funny. But I thought, well, this is beautiful because some people don't know you as that jazz drummer. and some people know you as that jazz drummer, but you did this and you can't get away from it. And we
Yeah.
need to right. It's like Michael Shreve when I had him on the show. He said it took him 30 years to get away from that whole Woodstock thing. And I said, it's a stamp that it's going to be there. It's like being inoculated. It's there, done, move on.
I'm like Erskine or any of those guys. We were all jazz drummers, and then when in the '70s you were making a living, and the main jazz artists were playing some type of fusion thing. So I remember when I auditioned with Herbie, I actually kind of came out of a sort of an Elven kind of thing, and he was like, "No, we're not doing that." Because I had my little 18-inch Gretsch drum set and my K cymbals, and I was showing him all my Tony and Elvin stuff, and he's like, no, that's not. Play that funky thing that Paul Jackson always tells me you can do. And I'm like, okay. So I played my crazy beats, and he was like, oh, that's it. So that's how that happened, but I will just drop this in here and we can discuss this later, but do you know Michael Shreve, David Garibaldi, Lenny White, myself, and Greg Rico have a group called the Stick People, and we just interviewed Jack DeJohnette the other day, and we interviewed Dennis and Stanley Clark and Steve Jordan and
Nice.
Hart and blah blah blah, all of them. So it's the Stick People, and so we just spent some time with Jack the other day, which was incredible. But it's funny as hell because you've got all of these intense drummers asking other intense artists, not just drummers, questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Fun, man.
Man, that would be hot in the room.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
tell me, I'm curious about when you got the audition for Herbie. Did someone just call you? Someone recommended you, or he saw you play? How did that come about?
Well, it was quite easy because my best friend in life ever, the great Paul Jackson, the bass player,
Ah,
we were
yes.
best friends years before Herbie. And Paul played upright bass, and we played with Bobby Hutcherson and Woody Shaw and, whoever the jazz guys were. So Paul also worked at Sherman and Clay, which was a popular music store, and he was the manager. So he would check out instruments out of the warehouse and bring them home. So I had a big place to stay. I lived in a house that he later moved into when his wife kicked him out, and he brought with him a B3 organ and two Leslies from the store, from the warehouse, and an electric bass. And he just put the electric bass in the corner of the room because we were snobby, hardcore jazz guys, and we didn't want the electric instruments. We loved the B3, of course. And one day he said, but I always kind of played those weird funk beats that I play because I was in a lot of organ groups around Oakland. And we'd play Mercy, Mercy and Horace Silver kind of funk. And I would dress it. I'd get tired of playing Boogaloo, and I was searching for some new ways of, and so I sort of came up with that stuff on the gig. Yeah, I didn't think it through. It wasn't technical. I just started. I put maybe the left hand on the hi-hat or two notes on the hi-hat, two on the snare, and two in the bass drum. I started just screwing around with different ways of doing things and put a backbeat here and there, and the organ players all loved it. And so Paul had said, hey, play that, your funky beats for a minute, will you? And I went, sure. And he opened the electric bass up and took it out of the case. It was a Fender Precision. And he played it just like you hear him play with Herbie Hancock as soon as he took it out of the box. And I'm like, wow. And it was very busy. And I said, man, if you're going to play like that, we need to hire a bass player, because he played a 16th note everywhere. Anyway, so we started, it was easier to carry than the big bass and all that. So we started doing some gigs around town, and that became very popular. Then Paul got the gig with Herbie Hancock, and Harvey Mason did Headhunter, the first record.
Right.
And then Harvey had such a lucrative career that when Herbie wanted to go on the road to promote the record, Harvey said, "Hell no, yeah, I'm not going to go out there." In those days, for 300 a week, I'm making a fortune. I think he bought an apartment building. So Paul said, "I know the guy," and so Herbie said, "Well, bring him over." And that's when I made the audition I told you about. And that's how it happened.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and then as they say, the rest is history. That's
It,
amazing
as
that
they say.
yeah, yeah. And then you went on to do some other headhunter projects. Was that your own project that you were doing?
Well, it's not mine. It's like the Headhunters. We kind of all, like any band at that time where everybody was young and crazy, we all got mad at each other and went our separate ways. So a few years later, I had, by the way, played with Brand X with Percy Jones and those guys,
Ah, okay.
and made a couple. I went to stay in England at Ringo Starr's house. This is a hell of a story because he had a studio called Startling Studios, and Phil Collins and Percy called me and said, "Hey, we know you from the Thrust record. Phil's too busy to do this. You want to play this stuff." Now, I've never really played fusion. At the time that I left Herbie, I was home playing with Eddie Henderson. He had a jazz band with some great stars in it. God, Pharoah Saunders would play, and Joe Henderson and Dave Liebman. It was an amazing gig. 5 nights a week for a year, a jazz gig. I thought I died and went to heaven. People
Nice.
are you sad because you left Herbie? And I'm like, no. I love Herbie Hancock, don't get me wrong. But anyway, I did the Brand X thing. And then after that kind of made me popular again because, when you do jazz gigs, nobody even knows you're doing them.
Right.
And the Brand X gave me popularity again. And Bill Summers called me and said, "Hey, let's put the Headhunters back together." It was very easy to do because we had a name. We called the great Donald Harrison, Big Chief Donald Harrison, who's a genius and the funkiest guy on the planet, and a couple other guys, and we put the band back together. We called an agent in Europe, and bam, he said, "Hey, let's do this." So we're still going. We got a record that just came out 2 weeks ago called Speakers in the House.
Yes, I saw that. I have to hear this one.
Ain't bad.
Nice, nice. So you're at Ringo Starr's house. Yeah. Well, so he
Yeah.
had a studio right in the house?
Yeah, he had this mansion that he bought. It was the mansion that he bought it from John and Yoko. I don't know these people. I've never met Ringo Starr. But I know that when I got in there, they gave me the master bedroom because I'm the weird American guy. They didn't know me. And they all knew each other, the band. And it was in Ascot, England. And on one side of the bed, it said John, and the other side, Yoko. And there was a switch where you could open, if you hit the switch on either side, these shutters would open on this window that was overhead, and a giant Tyrannosaurus that was, I don't know what it was made of. It was 50 feet high, was looking in the window. It was one of the statue of the Tyrannosaurus from that movie that Ringo made. And you would be and then they had cooks, and it was a huge mansion. And the recording studio was in the basement, and it was an amazing time. We had a blast. I'd never played this kind of music before, and it was an amazingly creative experience for me. These cats could play, John Goodsall on guitar and Percy Jones, the great, on bass, and it was fantastic. I thought it was fantastic.
Nice, nice. That's good to know because when you're digging and you want to hear what other people are playing or what some things you never think about or there's just too much out there. It's like just recently I ran into a recording, a film actually, a little video of Bill Bruford with Phil Collins playing together while Bill was with Genesis for a minute, and they're playing, the two of them playing, unbelievable, really
Oh, yes, sir. Yes,
incredible.
I played a couple of tracks with Phil. He was great. I loved playing with him, and two drummers. And we also did a lot of gigs opposite Bruford when Jeff Berlin was in the band.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And then Bruford stopped playing drums. I mean, that was it's crazy. But I mean, he's done other things, of course. But he probably did enough for a lifetime anyway,
Yeah,
musically.
I'd say so. Yeah, sure he did.
And now, I mean, recently, during this whole time, now you have this album out with Headhunters. And what other projects have you been doing? I know, before you answer that, I know you did a whole bunch of educational things. I remember watching a video with you and Paul explaining that whole. This is way back, explaining how you did that. You know what your whole process was. He would play, or you would play, and then you would explore. Okay, how would I interpret that, or what would I do with that? That was a great idea. Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for. I'm glad you liked it. It was sure fun to do. It was a crazy experience because Paul Jackson is like the most natural guy. He didn't, there was. I taught it at the Drummers Collective, so DCI was there. So I saw a few videos being made, and there were scripts and all this. There was no script with Paul. He's like, "Yeah, man." I'm like, "Paul, I just got off the plane I flew to Narita. I got off the plane and I'm like, well, Paul, I didn't even know we were going to do a video. We're supposed to do a tour. We were going to do a tour, which we did." He said, "Yeah, man, we're going to make a video." And I'm like, "Wow, great. When?" He goes like, "Well, we're going to have to start like in a few hours. I'm in the airport parking lot." Boston, man,
Nice.
13-hour flight. And so we drove to a lighthouse, believe it or not, a lighthouse somewhere in Japan. And then instead of having a jazz kit, he had one of those big fusion kits with all of those big cases, and we carried it all the way, the two of us, up the stairs to the top of that lighthouse where they're going to film it. Oh my God. And then the film crew is there. They arrive. And I'm like, "Okay, Paul, what script have you got? What are we going to do here?" And he goes like, "Oh, man, don't worry about it, man. I got it all together." And I'm like, well, you got what together? What do I need to know?" And he's like, "Oh, man, shit, don't worry about that. Like it's all good." And I'm like, "Okay." So really, this is true. When we got out there, they turned the camera on. He's like, and then he put a lot of it on me. Now, I love this guy, so everything is cool. But he goes like this, "Hey, Mike, remember that thing we did with Herbie?" And I didn't know which thing. God, we played 5 years. What are you talking? And then we would just kind of start playing. But we always had from day one, from the first day I played with this guy on the jazz side, we always had telepathy. We didn't even have to, when we had our own bands, we didn't even count things in sometimes. We just start playing, and the sidemen had to just play with us, man. So it was homemade, and I think that's why it was fun, and it was real too. It was, we knew how to do these things, but it was quite a departure from some of the videos that I'd seen at DCI, where everything was really together.
Yeah, or script. Well, I mean, yours was together. It was natural for sure, and it was like in the moment. I mean,
Yeah, for sure in the
yeah. I mean, now
moment.
that you say that it was like one of those first take things, it's like Steve Gadd with Asia. I mean, you can't rehearse that. I mean, you have
Can't rehearse that. Yes, sir.
just this is the conversation at that second, and here's what comes out. It could be a disaster, or it could be a most brilliant thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Herbie was very much like that too. He would have skeleton ideas, and then you go in the studio and you flush them out right then and there. And that's what it is. I mean, we would rehearse, but never really anything written and going over and over things. He would just give you this kind of vague idea. And then I go home thinking about it. You can't practice because you not quite remember what he said. It's you sort of, then you go in there and that's it, man. You get it on. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the way it was then. I don't know what he's doing now, but that's how we went about it. And that was his process then.
And there are a lot of guys like that in like like an intense creative process. I mean, Miles was like that too, right? I mean, on the moment you're on the spot.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean,
Vince Guaraldi too. I worked with Vince Guaraldi for years. No rehearsals, nothing. You just go in and do all those. I did a couple of those Peanuts, Charlie Brown shows.
yes, yes.
Not you don't know what you're doing at all. Not you just he'll be like, "Give me something right about here."
Nice.
Okay,
Oh yeah, no, and I honestly, I think That's a true high when that happens. I mean, I've had a few of those myself where you don't know what you're playing. You're just there. And I remember David Amram, who you probably know in New York. He calls me. He was doing the Montreal Jazz Festival. He says, "Call me a bass player," and the rehearsal is I'll see you at 4 or 5 or something like that. But it was not a rehearsal, it was the sound check. So the bass player's looking at me and he says, "Well, what time is the concert?" I said, "Ask him." I don't. And what are we playing? I say, "I don't know." But it's just the moment, you play and then you look at each other and you just play, right? And now you're under pressure. Well, the musical pressure that, I mean, all that you've done now comes together in your head.
Yes,
And
and your
with these people,
intuition.
so and probably
I do a lot of gigs like that. I played with Sonny Stitt when I was quite young. I wasn't in his band, but I did a few nights. And there was a trio. He didn't know any of us. And he just walked up. He didn't count any tunes. He didn't tell you what tune, what key, nothing. He just started playing. And we're like, okay. And man, it worked great.
sure,
It
sure.
was fine, you know.
If everybody's on the level, musically speaking, there's no reason it shouldn't work because everybody's antennas are really up because they have to be. You're watching and listening intensively, and the interaction will be totally on the moment, and you can't miss. Your eyes are wide open, and your ears are dishes, receptors,
You know,
right?
there's a humanity about that I love, the musical conversation. That's why I think I gravitate towards jazz music. First of all, I love the physical sensation of swinging when it's really working and you're really swinging and it feels free. You know, not free like playing free, but it's just loose and it's swinging. And then also we're having this dialogue and people are sharing their understanding with each other, their talent with each other, and their humanity. So it's not one guy up there showing off. It's like a very adult conversation and intellectually rewarding, and then as well as the rhythmical aspect. It's so much fun that we all love, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have. I mean, you're giving a piece of yourself, and you're exposing, and everybody else has to put this together. Like it's kind of the creative, that creativity is a sum total of all of these forces that are just put out there, and it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we're so lucky to be doing this, Mike.
Yeah, man, you got that right. You know what I mean? We are. Yeah, I know. Whoever it's, and we followed this passion, all of us, all since we were kids, man. Since we first, whenever you start, not you, but any of us started playing that are still in the game, where you can't quit, man. It's just too great of an experience for all of us. I mean, all of the great musicians and. Oh goodness, it's like we're not like ball players, that at 35 or 40 you catch an injury, you're done, man. Um,
Yeah, and many people, I mean, especially in music, because it's such a mental, physical thing, but not overly like some of the sports stuff. We can last a lot longer. We're also, I mean, the sanity factor is incredible. And look at how many people, conductors are like drummers, because they're always moving, right? And we last forever just because we challenge ourselves, and also we keep this curiosity going. I'm still looking at things. I'm sure you're still studying things.
all the time.
You know,
Yes.
and all of a sudden you realize, boy, I don't know this thing,
Yep.
and it's Yolan, she said to me recently, I'm working on something. She says, how many years are you going to be working at that? And my answer would be until I get it right. And I'm still looking, you know. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, to remain curious and to remain with the attitude that you haven't arrived, right, Mike? I mean,
No,
God forbid you
absolutely.
arrive.
No, there's nothing for me to add. Because what you just said is exactly uh, how I live anyway. I'm constantly seeking and I'm constantly shoring up holes in my playing and in my understanding and adding language that I should have added a long time ago and something that I've been doing wrong for 40 years. I better fix it. Oh God, it never stops.
Isn't that incredible? Just to think, just the thought that you could actually still be doing this. I mean, to me, it is a
Oh,
mind blower,
I know.
honestly. And
I,
no
I,
matter, and then
I,
it's not even about age anymore. It's about where you are in your mind, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I like people. I play with guys 18 to my age, women, men. I don't care who you are or how old you are or whatever. None of that.
Yeah,
Uh, Nah, man. It's about the art of the moment, what you're doing at that moment. We live for those moments, I think, you know what I mean? That's when I feel I was at the Monterey Jazz Festival recently and we caught a groove that was like incredible. And I didn't, I was unaware of who was around me as far as watching or I mean, I was still playing for the people, but I was submerged in the laboratory, man. You know what I mean? It's just God. I mean,
yeah,
like you say, we're very fortunate to be able to do
unbelievable.
this.
And it's a language, right? And so when you really think of it, we say the universal language and all of that, which is true. But I think it goes beyond that, and I think if we live long enough, we should have create this country called musicians, because we all speak that same language. We can have our own passports. We can live in the other countries we want.
Oh,
But what do you think, Mike?
I love that. I just came back from 8 days in Jamaica on the beach. That'd be a good start to get some land down there.
And
A
that we
couple-
could be connected through this language, and we speak music, right? So it doesn't
oh,
matter where you are,
doesn't matter. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
because
Yeah.
we understand each other at a moment's notice. I mean, and you've played with people who didn't speak English, or I speak four languages. It doesn't. If people I'm playing with don't speak any of those four, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
The other one, the fifth one.
Yeah, I that's a good idea. Although we should do that.
A next project that'll keep us going. So what are some of the plans you have in the works now, Mike?
Well, I'm going to get you. I have, if you will. Let's see. I have right here. This has been out for a while, so this isn't any new. A lot of records I've been doing. I'll tell you about. I won't name them all, but I do a lot of jazz records now. I and I plus the Headhunters. I just have one. I'm on with Russell Malone, the guitar player, and I have quite a few out with a jazz on Jazz One with Leon Lee Dorsey, the great bass player. We have one. I'm trying to organize this in my mind because we made so doggone many. We have one Beatles record where we're swinging. We took some Beatles songs and we played straight ahead. That's with the great
Nice.
Michael Wolff, Leon Lee Dorsey, great bass player, and myself. Another one with Manny Valera, Leon and I were Freedom Jazz Dance, where we played a real modern kind of crazy acoustic jazz thing and some swinging. And then we one with the Mike LaDon, a jazz trio that was just came off the charts recently, and now we have this new one with Russell coming up. And we've made a couple others. I can one with we made Harold Mayburn's last record, the great pianist. So me and Leon have about 6 records we've made in the past couple of years. Another guy, Mike Zilber, a great tenor player, and I have a record out called Mike Drop, and we have another one coming up. Let's see, I'm on about 3 Eddie Henderson records, and the latest one I just did a track on Eddie's record with Kenny Barron and Donald Bailey and Gerald Cannon and Lenny White on drums, 2 drummers, man. It's
Wow.
smoking. Uh, Anyway, I got a bunch of stuff like that going on, and I'm going down to Baltimore to the Keystone to do a Mike Clark, if you will, plays Herbie Hancock, but not the funky stuff, the jazz stuff, and not one finger snap and all that. I went way back to his early records, and it's going to be Donald Harrison, Eddie Henderson, Essie at the great bassist, myself, and John Davis, and I'm also there's a great jazz and soul singer in Oakland named Faye Carroll, and I'm going out there next week to do a run of gigs with her and a great young piano player named Joe Warner. And in Hudson Music, I have this, the Post Bop Drum Book. And in here, I put all my jazz stuff. Instead of writing what Philly Joe did and Elvin and rehashing what those guys do, which I'll never be able to do what they did, I did what I do. So, and it did pretty good. So Rob
Nice.
Wallace and I spoke, and he's like, "Let's do this," and I'm like, "I mean, it was my idea," and he said, "Yeah, come on, let's do it." So we did.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations. That's good, and I'm glad you're putting those out there because we should make sure that everything we've done is out there for people to enjoy, to study, and to make it their own if they want. I'm glad you did that.
Bill Makowski had called me and he got an offer from a publishing company to do a book on me. Now, I'm not saying that my contribution or my life merits a book, but if they want to do, if they want to do one, I don't mean a drum book. I mean a book about all the crazy stuff that I've done besides playing drums, and of course, along with, but he did a book on Pat Martino and Brecker, and I'm not a high profile as far as a band leader like those guys, but I've been around forever, and so they felt it might be a good idea. So we're working on it.
Yeah, nice. Well, people know who you are, and
Yeah.
I mean sometimes they have to reference, but I mean you've done so much and you've been on so many records and being around, and also, I mean, it's nice when they see you in person, also, like you did at Cosa.
Oh, yeah.
You can actually be in the room and have that discussion and discuss, what were you thinking when you were playing that? What brought you to this, or what frame of mind are you in when you're doing this? Those are important, and you're still doing it, which is great.
I think once you get to a certain point, like you're at a certain point, I'm at a certain point, I think then if one develops his concentration abilities and you're able to super focus and bring your thing to the party without upsetting the apple cart, I think that pretty much can't ask for much more than that, except for uh, uh, who's my man Sergio? Remember Velotti, who thinks I only own one drum brush.
Yes, but what you do, right? But what you do with one brush is a lot. Anyway,
He
but
teases me about this. It's an old anyway. Sure, whatever questions or whatever you feel like talking about.
yeah, no, I mean, I think what's really interesting is in the interest of moving forward, because there's always a juncture in music and what pushes you into one music and another. For example, in the late '50s, there were a lot of jazz guys. Then you had the rock and roll come. Many just continued their own way in the jazz world. Others pivoted over. I'm thinking, people like yourself, people like Pretty Birdie, uh, you know, uh, and a lot of people, Grady Tate, who also gravitated, and a lot of these people took that concept into another world. Now I think I'm seeing that there's another horizon of music, new music that is developing before our own eyes. Some of us don't see it. You have the technology involved, you have the creativity, um, and I think there's a lot more pressure on the individual to be, um, for lack of a better word, musically multitasking. There's a lot more going on to be aware of to keep it interesting. There's always going to be good music and not so good music, But the good music will always be, world will always need music, and it keeps us going, right?
Oh,
And what about
absolutely. Yeah.
all those kids who are, you say, 18? Well, they also have a long way to go too, and it's
Yeah.
you see it, right?
Absolutely. No, I know. Absolutely. I mean, I keep uh, getting calls to do things that are out of my comfort zone, things I don't know anything about. I'm like, really? Okay. Um, I was called to. Oh, it reminds me. Geez, I was called to uh, play hip hop beats like the machines do, not like the drummers do, like the machine. Now, I don't know anything about that, and I'm like, well, maybe. And then the guy wants to play some really avant-garde rock and roll over the top of this.
Wow.
We're going to do it in sections. It's not like a band that's going to be there together. So now I have to listen to some machine hip hop beats and then figure out what I'm going to do that's actually me, that my take on these machine beats. They're not made by humans. These are actual. So it's sort of, and the guy called me to do it and he offered me a nice piece of change. And I said, yeah, it's going to take me a while to find. I have a somewhat of a schedule coming up here. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to have to research this stuff.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm like, now that sounds very different,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And it gives you like fuel to in your engine, right? It and I mean, just recently I had Jonathan Haas, the great percussionist, timpanist, as a guest, and he was talking to me about something he had just done, and it's actually Lenny White who composed this piece. It's a timpani hip hop piece.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So I heard it and I flipped. I said, "No, we have to hear this." So I had him play it on the show. So yeah, I said, "This is beautiful. It's a what a great idea." There's certain things you can do. Bring it to the table. Let the things go forward like others before us did for us.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
remember when I haven't heard it yet, but I've heard pieces of it because he would pick me up in the car. He teaches at the college, and then he sometimes we're movie friends, so we go to movies together. And then he would say, "Hey, listen to I've written this, and I have the students working on this. Check this out or check that out." And I'm like, "Wow, yeah, man."
Incredible. And, who would have thought? And here's Lenny White, who I remember growing up and watching him with Return to Forever with Chick Corea, that, incredible band.
Oh my God, yes.
I saw them a couple of times. Al Di Meola was in the band, and Stanley Clark was in the band. It was just, wow, what a ride that was.
I got some trivia for you that might be fun for the listener. Okay, Lenny White was in town playing with Azteca in the Bay Area, and him and I became friends. Now, I met him when he was playing with Freddie Hubbard, and I knew him as a jazz drummer. And he called me and he said, "I got to play. I'm going to play with Chick Corea. Uh-oh. I'm going to play with Chick Corea, and um, I'm going to play with Chick Corea, and I have a little 18-inch Gretsch blonde bass drum kit, and it's not enough." So we went to Leo's Music in Oakland, which used to be the place to go, and he saw a big clear set of fives, I think it was. It was a see-through set. This is before Billy Cobham now and all that.
Sure. Early 70s, right?
Billy was recording for CTI. I don't think Mahavishnu had happened yet. And I bought the Gretsch drum set of Lenny's, so that because I wanted it. And then this would afford him the down payment on this big 5 set that he went to play with Stanley and Chick at the Keystone Jazz Club. And that was the first night he played with Chick Corea. And Dick
Nice.
Connors was playing guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much.
And then I took that blonde little Gretsch drum set on the road with Herbie Hancock when I first joined the drum band, and they played so loud I beat it to death. I killed that drum set. I beat the rims down. Oh my God. How can you beat the rims down on a drum set? You know, the heads were all, I mean, it was just, it was just because there was so much volume. I wasn't used to it. I'm like, really? We're going to do this? You know?
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know who does bend drums? Well, he used to was Carmine Appice.
Yes, he could he's powerful. He could really hit Carmine. Yeah.
I remember once at the Coza camps, one year he was there, Joe Morello was there, and Joe walks in the room, and as we all know, Joe was fairly blind. So he walked in the room, he sat down, and he put his hand on the snare drum. His hand went across the rim, and he said, "Was Carmine here?" So I started laughing. I thought that was pretty funny.
Those Kosa things were fantastic, man. All those drummers together and all the funny stuff I heard. I had a blast, man. Holy cow. Oh, man.
Yes. We should write a book about all of those, and from Cuba to Vermont to China to.
Oh, absolutely. What a journey that is. Come on. That's fantastic, man,
I'm going to have to ask everyone to pitch in with their stories of this, because that would be even more interesting.
A lot of great drummers,
Yes. So, but before we go, I wanted to, I mean, we can go talking, all day, of course, and there's so much, but I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to be on with this, and I'm looking forward to listening to those records. It's the new Headhunters for sure.
Oh yeah,
the must-haves.
We did. I'm sorry. We did a medium tempo Elven type swing version of Actual Proof. Check that out.
Okay. Then I'll have to listen to this and let you know. Now you got me curious. I need to hear this. Fantastic. But thanks again. And as I always say, Mike, to be continued.